Yeah, Kingdom has now run, I think, for sort of 3 or 4 major stories. It was created by myself and the artist Richard Elson, who's drawn every single episode of it. And it's a kind of post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery thing, I think, in its simplest terms, about genetically modified warriors who were built for a specific purpose, to fight a war that mankind couldn't fight, against rapidly mutating and giant-sized insects known as them, with a nod to the classic sci-fi movie. But this is long after the war has sort of come to a grounding halt. Humankind has disappeared, and it's just these warriors surviving in groups. And it's they continue to fight the insects. One of the things that we tried to do in creating it was to give it its own sort of language and patois. So even the narrative is sort of spoken in this slightly strange voices that the main characters in the strip use, and they are all they are all named after, as they call it, they're named after stars, which they think means stars in the sky, but they're actually all named after, because they were built by humans, named after movie stars. So the main character is called Gene Hackman, and he is a hackman. He hacks things to pieces, and he thinks that's how he got his name. But it really is an opportunity to do something sort of quite sort of muscular and adventurous in that kind of barbarian action, but with a completely different slant to it, and echoes of, quite quirky echoes of what the modern world is like and how it's become what it is in the story.
Okay, let's talk about Gene Hackman as a character. Aside from as you say, the unusual patois that they have, he has gone from being the leader of his own pack.
Yeah.
He teamed up with a young human girl, and he's found himself on his own, finding huge nests of them, and various other horrors in the world. It truly is a post-apocalyptic world.
It is, yeah.
Well, what's it been like taking the sword to everything that we know and cherish?
Yes, that part. I suppose that part is ruthless fun. I think one of the stories there is actually flashbacks to the sort of 50s era where everything is going to hell in a handbasket, and that was fun to do, to parallel the two. I think it's stripping away the layers of this apparently apocalyptic world and finding the remnants of humanity underneath it. And it's a voyage of self-discovery for Gene, of course, because the more he goes on, the more he learns what he is and where he derived from. It's no real secret that they are actually genetically modified dogs that have been turned into humanoid form because of their loyalty and their robustness and this kind of stuff. There's a sort of telepathic instruction system, order system, which is called his master's voice, which they listen to every morning. It tells them what to do, and they obediently go and do this. Humankind is asleep in cryogenic suspension under Antarctica, the only part of the world that the them haven't reached. So the story starts there and moves out across Tasmania and eventually into what he knows as Australia. So a lot of both urban and outback action in the course of the story. And as he goes along, he really discovers that mankind has been overwhelmed, and that's a lot of the things that he takes for granted aren't true or come from a very sort of mysterious, twisted place. It's sort of there are a lot of inversions in the story where you realise that he's been thinking about something in one way and it turns out it's the opposite. So that's fun. That's fun to do.
Nick, you've worked with Dan on FIEFDOM. Can you tell us a bit about the genesis of the novel? Why did you decide to take a strip that Dan had been writing as a comic book and have done it as a prose novel?
I loved the comic book. There was such lyricism in the language that he was using, and I felt that there was just room to expand on that. To put that into a prose form was something that I wanted to do, and to expand the characters, to build more characters. There seemed to be a lot of room for that. To take it also to another world, to bring it forward in time. There just seemed a huge amount of scope there for all of those things.
Of course, Gene Hackman doesn't actually appear in despite having been the protagonist of the comic book, he's not the protagonist of the novel. Why did you decide to focus on another part of the Kingdom universe?
He was such a huge character in my mind, and and in the pictures too, in Richard Elson's drawings, that I didn't want to touch him. I wanted to leave him with Dan, and there were more stories for Dan to tell in pictures in that way. So I wanted to make him a legend in his own right for more orcs to look up to. So that really was the intent there.
He's definitely a mythical presence in fiefdom. He's a sort of this spirit of something they all understand, and I think for readers of the comic coming to the novel, there'll be quite a nice sort of resonance backwards, in the same way I was talking about resonances forward from our world to where he's got to. It's that backward-looking thing of them knowing more about what the actual legend is than the characters in the book. The other reason, obviously, in purely practical terms, is that Richard and I are still producing the comic strip, and we didn't want to entangle the two so badly that we prevented either from having satisfactory closure or development as story and comic strip side by side. And it was, as Nick says, very nice to look at a completely different part of the world and see what had happened there.
Nick, what's your writing relationship like? Is there someone who does the heavy lifting and then someone adds polish, or is it a mixture of the two of you?
I think it's a mixture of all sorts of things. It starts with us talking quite a lot, bringing our ideas together, forming a plot, and I think that's a very shared experience actually, isn't it? I mean, that's usually a bottle of wine and 2 or 3 hours just chewing the fat. And we very much play off each other. We're sounding boards for each other, and it's a very equivalent experience, I think. And then usually I start writing actually, and I keep going and keep feeding that material to Dan until I've had enough of it or he's had enough of reading it. And then it's a sort of a game of tag pretty much, isn't it? We pick up each other's threads. If he's writing, he might say, oh, can you change this, or can you feed something in on one of your sections, or those things go backward and forward. I tend to do most of the research, I think, because Dan's schedule is busier than mine. He might say, you know, I need some stuff on say, the Berlin Underground system, which was something I did quite a lot of work on for this book. Or he'll say, you know, research some names for me, or, you know, I've left some placeholders, can you find things? So I tend to do more of the research side of things.
Yeah.
I don't know. What else
well, I mean, we often work. I mean, we work side by side on our own projects anyway, and have in the last few years come to working in the same room. So that even if we're doing completely different things, I'll often stop and go, "What's the word for?" And or vice versa. So that there is a connectivity. And Nick is my first reader on my solo novels and that kind of stuff. So there is a great connectivity between the way we work side by side. So just to sort of close that gap even further and actually work on the same text simultaneously, not one writing and one editing, but actually both doing both. So I can be reading parts of the stuff that she's written and twiddling things to sort of bring it into the flow of what I see Kingdom as being, and then perhaps one of us might notice that one of us is being repetitive about a word, and therefore can send that person away to have a look at that particular that word whilst the next person writes the next bit. So it's
I tend to do final cleanups.
Yes, the very final cleanup is always Nick. But I can't spell. That says Kingdom.
But it's quite. I mean, we've known each other more than 30 years. It's quite a organic.
Yeah, and you can also then. I mean, one of the things that I find. I mean, Kingdom are obviously quite infamous for its naming conventions, where not only Gene Hackman being the obvious example, but everybody is a film star, but that also has some kind of dog or war related connection to, and actually coming up with those sometimes when I'm writing the comic strip, that can stop me in my tracks when I need a new character and I just simply cannot think of a name. And obviously with this there's even more characters were required, so we finally at several points, whenever we thought one we'd write one down in our notebooks, but there were several points where we had left so many placeholders, because it was like, we'll name that character eventually, just call him Fred for now, whatever. We actually just sat down and had just a dedicated brainstorm session for how to come up with a bunch of names, made the list, then fitted them back into the book, and suddenly all these characters had names, and it was sort of that, and that would have been much harder to do on your own, to sit there with a notebook going, I don't know, but one person say something triggers something in the other person. You might end up with something completely different, but it's that sparking thing.
Obviously, you've been playing in the Kingdom world ever since you and Richard created it. Was there something, a point where Nick said something or came up with something that was something you just hadn't thought of before, some completely fresh perspective?
I think quite a lot of the things in fiefdom. I think Reece.
The title for start.
Well, the title was and also the placement of it. The fact that this is what's happening in Europe. and the way that therefore the naming conventions are altered, and also the way that the legends of the past are worked out. There are more legends presented.
I wanted to use a tunnel too. It was going to be the Channel Tunnel originally, wasn't it? But that's how we came to be in Berlin in the underground system, because I wanted that closed environment. So that came from me, I think.
Yeah.
But it isn't like that. It isn't, oh, she said this and he said that. It is much more organic than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's one of its strengths. So it's a matter of bringing new things to it to make it very distinct from Kingdom. That is to say, the setting and that kind of thing. Yet unmistakably Kingdom. So there was a fine balancing act, and I think that's really worked in terms of two minds working on it rather than one.
What's it like seeing something new and something fresh, something a little bit different coming to life?
Always exciting to see something new. It's always exciting to actually see the physical. I mean, it's only a couple of hours ago since we first laid eyes on the first physical specimens, which is lovely. And literally and metaphorically, that's where it becomes real, and you realise there's this product that's going out there, and you suddenly get quite excited about the fact that people are going to see it and hopefully want it and read it and enjoy it and everything. So. I always, and the other thing is because it usually happens quite late. The book usually comes out and then you get sent a copy in the post for your publisher, and then a few months later you'll get your comps. And so that connection to the physical object usually takes quite a long time, unless you're lucky enough to see it in the shops. To get in to do this pre-signing, this limited edition signing, was a delight, because we're actually getting to see it before anybody else does, so we can get excited and get the word out there and see them on. Huge blocks of them, absolutely.
Pallets and pallets of them. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And actually, we only wrote it very, very recently as well, so it's still very fresh, this one, isn't it?
Sometimes you can write something and it, disappears for a year, and then suddenly comes out. And you go, oh, that's now been published, and then others are much closer to the process, and I think that keeps the vitality in there as well, because we're still energised by this, and it's already here, so that's good.
And one last question. Kingdom is known for being high octane, full of action, being quite violent. Is there a core message behind it? Not necessarily just with Gene Hackman, but with the world. Is there a sense of something deeper happening in there?
I think there's a sense of all sorts of things: resourcefulness, loyalty, community. Those kind of things, and also the sort of perhaps some kind of overall message about man's overweening ambitions and the troubles he gets into, because clearly the whole situation is sort of his fault in the first place. And I think there's have I left any themes out?
I don't think so.
No. But it is. I think there's some very strong positive ones, like I said, like loyalty, like companionship, like community.
I think that loyalty, family thing is quite important.
Yeah.
Community is quite important in this book. For me, it was.
Yes, and the balance of characters. Now, obviously, one of the principal characters in this one is a strong female character, which is another nice contrast to Kingdom. And I think her position in their hierarchy in society is an interesting thing to watch, and again, perhaps a comment on society, how societies work.
There's a little undercurrent of faith too.
Oh, faith! We forgot faith.
Why did you decide to work on this novel together?
I kind of wanted to, didn't I? I loved Kingdom. I've always admired Dan's work, and when I get the chance, I'll work with him. And so I elbow my way in.
Yeah, we got offered the opportunity to do it, and so I said to my wife, "Do you want to write this?" That's.
The writer's lot's a lonely one. We sit in the same room, we work on different things. We actually share everything we work on pretty much, don't we? So to work together, it's it's a Basman's holiday. It's a nice thing to do.